Axios is getting ready to release their first field watch, and they are packing a lot into this watch for the price that they're offering it. In fact, this might be the best field watch I've ever seen at under $300. You get a great classic design that has some updated modern elements, amazing lume, screw down crown with 200 meters of water resistance, and a custom metal bracelet that's really unheard of in this price range. Today we're going to take a look at the prototype for the Axios Pathfinder. Hey guys, this is Dave. Welcome back to Just the Watch, and today we're taking a look at the Axios Pathfinder. This watch is just about to launch on Kickstarter, or if I was late in getting this review out, it might be up already. But Axios is offering this at a really incredible discount for the Kickstarter campaign, and I do think this is an amazing value and a great opportunity to get a pretty great watch for under 300 bucks. Now Axios is allowing me to borrow these watches. They're prototypes. I'm going to be sending them back to Axios after I'm done. However, they did mention that they would send me a production version of the watch should it be successfully funded. So that's why you're seeing the paid promotions flag on this video. However, other than the promise of the watch, I did not receive any compensation at all for this, nor did Axios have any input into the content of this review. On the spec side, you're getting everything you would expect from a micro brand launching a Kickstarter in this price range, and a lot more. You're getting the Sapphire Crystal and the Seiko AH35 movement, which are both very standard, but everything else about the watch is stuff that you typically don't find in watches around this price. You're getting 200 meters of water resistance with a screw down crown. They've done an absolutely amazing job with the lume on this watch. I don't even understand how they could have done this. They're using that kind of warm brown tone lume. That kind of brownish vintage Certina sort of lume style is very popular right now. It looks great, especially on a vintage inspired piece like this, but the cost has always been that it's really dim lume when you actually get in the dark. Somehow they've figured out a way around that problem, and I've never seen a watch been able to do this. They're also including an absolutely fantastic custom 5-link bracelet. It just has a really great look and feel. Again, unlike anything else that I've seen out there. Dimensions are also spot on. They're just the classic dimensions that everybody's looking for. 40 millimeter case, 20 millimeter lugs, nice compact 46 millimeter lug to lug. And the thickness is okay. It's 12 millimeters tall, so it's not an ultra thin watch, but it does have, you know, the Seiko AH35 movement inside and 200 meters of water resistance. And in a watch of this style, I feel like that 12 millimeters actually wears really well, gives it a good amount of wrist presence, and is not uncomfortable at all. But as I think everybody knows, specifications is not everything. So it's fairly easy to get a really well-spec'd watch at a really decent price, but most often you're either going to get kind of subpar design work, or you're just going to get a copy of an existing design. So originality in design is an area where a good micro brand can really prove themselves, and I think Axios has done a fantastic job here. They've gone with a really kind of classic 1940s field watch aesthetic. You're getting full Arabic numerals all the way around the dial with this kind of train track chaptering going around the outside, and they've complemented that with a handset that's kind of these simple pencil-shaped hands with dividing lines in between it, and those elements really sell that kind of vintage field watch design that's very attractive and appealing. But then they've taken that design and they've done some interesting things with it, some really nice modern touches. For one, all of the Arabics are applied Arabics. This gives them some depth as they pop up out of the dial. So Axios was kind enough to loan me two different versions. I have the white dial and the black dial, and I'm glad they did because there's definitely some key differences between them, and I feel like they've taken full advantage of both of these dials. So on the black dial one, you're getting this kind of silver polished indexes and hands. And because of that high polish work on the border of all of the indexes and on the hands themselves, it allows them to really catch the light in kind of dim lighting situations. And you get this really cool effect where it reflects back at you and you kind of really see that sharp outline from the polished surfaces. On the white dial, they've gone a different approach. Rather than using high polished indexes and hands, they've gone with a black outline, which gives you an incredible contrast against the white. I think that's exactly the right call, and it's just, I think it shows a lot of thought that they put into this. So many times I see brands, when they do different dial options, they just kind of stick with the same indexes and the same handset, rather than really trying to figure out what works best for a particular dial. And on a white dial like this, having that hard black outline around all of the indexes and the hands really aids in legibility and gives for just a really crisp look. On all the dials, they've gone with this kind of sand texture that you're seeing more and more. I think it works well here and does give some interest. And then they have kind of the railroad track around the outside is also kind of applied. It's sort of a little bit of a step up there. And then on that track as well, there are little pips and markers that kind of add some extra interest that are also lumed. So really interesting work there. The case finishing is also really well done. You get a lot of altering brushed and polished surfaces. The brushing is very fine and high quality, and those, distinctions between the brushed areas and the polished areas is very sharp and crisp. So you actually have a polished surface going along the bottom of the case. The middle area is brushed, another polished surface on the top. And then when you have the bezel that's built on top of that, again, you have even on the bezel itself an altering between polished and brushing and polishing. So a lot of interesting light play off of this, and they've gone through a lot of extra effort to make this a really great looking case and watch. The crystal itself is a flat sapphire crystal. I think that's the right choice when you're kind of dealing with this sort of thicker watch style. But with that thickness, they are giving you 200 meters of water resistance and a screw down crown. So really this watch is as capable in the water as most other dive watches out there. The bracelet on this watch is absolutely phenomenal. It just has a really smooth and fluid feel to it with those 5 links. It allows it to articulate very well. It can be folded flat on basically any of the links, giving it a great range of motion and allowing it to really conform to your wrist shape. It's also just a really beautiful bracelet. It's kind of interesting. You've got these sort of flat links on the edges, and then the 3 inner links have kind of rounded edges and so sort of polished surfaces as well. To me, it's kind of in between like a Beads of Rice or a Jubilee or an Engineer, but it's not quite any of those. It's something different, something that I believe that they designed for this watch. And that's a huge upgrade. I mean, at field watches in this price range, you never see bracelets like this. At best, you might see kind of like a standard oyster style bracelet or something that's easily mass produced, but to see something custom like this that really, I think, fits the character of the watch, that's comfortable and well designed, is a pretty surprising bonus. Now, there was one other issue on this prototype, and that was with the bracelet. When I initially got it, the links were kind of bent over and kinked backwards, and I had a really hard time straightening it out. So this is a problem with the bracelet. I talked to Axios about it. They are aware of it. They are working on a fix. They need to, round out some of the edges on the links to make it so that that doesn't happen. So as long as they get that part of the bracelet straightened out, this should be no problem, but that is something I did want to mention and make aware. Now, they've done some interesting stuff with the Lume, and I'm going to be doing a full Lume comparison in a minute here, but I want to talk a little bit about Axios. This is a watch that is coming to Kickstarter. And as I've mentioned before, sometimes Kickstarter can be a little bit intimidating. There's some extra risks involved, but I feel like Axios is a pretty safe bet. This is their 3rd watch that they've launched. The other 2 watches that they've launched have both been successfully put to market. They haven't had any major problems with distribution that I'm aware of, and they have a great reputation. Axios is also kind of related to Zelos in that the owner of Zelos is also one of the owners of Axios. So there's a lot of great experience behind them. And Axios, their kind of brand identity has been gravitating towards more vintage style pieces and more conservative sizes. So they've been putting out watches in this kind of 40 millimeter diameter size, and they've really been having a lot of their inspiration coming from vintage dive watches before. This is their first field watch. And I've been able to review all of their watches so far and found them all to be excellent. But none of them have been this cheap. So if you've been wanting to get hold of one of Axios' watches, but didn't want to jump up into that, close to $500 price range where they're normally sitting, this is a lot more affordable. And I still feel like it comes with a lot of the same benefits that you get from their more expensive models. So really cool to see them doing this. This watch is going to be on Kickstarter for $259 at the early bird prices. It's going to jump up to $279 after that. And then it's going to retail, I think, for $340, which even at that full retail price, I think is still a great deal for what they're offering you here. But at that early bird Kickstarter price, it's kind of insane. And again, with Axios, I think it's a fairly safe bet. So if you are interested in that, I would definitely recommend trying to jump in and grab it. Now, I do, however, have 2 minor complaints about this watch. The first is the choice of the Seiko NH35 movement. I don't mind them going with the Seiko movement to keep costs down, but in this case, they've gone with a no-date watch, and the Seiko NH35 is a watch movement that has a date position, so this watch does have a ghost date on it. I would have preferred to see them go with the Seiko NH38, which is Seiko's no-date version of that movement, so you don't have to worry about that. What a ghost date movement, all it means is that there's going to be the first position you pull the crown out is meant for setting the date. That is functionally useless on this watch because there is no date present on the dial. So you've got to pull out an extra step to get to the time setting. It doesn't really affect functionality much, but it does feel a little bit sloppy and kind of a cost-saving measure. I don't know if the plan is to offer a date version, if that's why they went with it, but yeah, it's kind of a minor gripe there. The second thing is the clasp on this watch. Now, the clasp is great. This is the exact same clasp that they included on their previous watch. It's a high-quality clasp with 6 micro adjusts, functions really well. And there's not, again, it's not really a problem with the clasp itself. It just feels like a dive clasp, and it feels like they did just kind of take the clasp from the previous model and just include it on this. And I feel like it doesn't quite match the style of the bracelet and the style of the watch that well. It would have been nice if they could have updated that to come up with something that sort of adds a touch of elegance. As it is, it just feels a little bit out of place, even though it is functionally an excellent clasp. But again, those are probably both cost-saving measures. If they would have been charging the same amount that they charge for their dive watches, yeah, I think this would have been a much bigger issue. But at this price range, you got to cut some corners somewhere to get it down there, and I think a lot of people are going to be really happy with that, to be able to save that much money and get their hands on a watch of this quality. All right, let's wrap this up by checking out the Lume, because the Lume is kind of crazy. Now, the thing about this Lume that surprised me so much, first, the color. So that warm brown tone Lume, that kind of vintage Lume, is almost always very dark when you actually light it up. The second thing is that they're using Arabic numerals on everything, which are very thin, and typically Arabics are harder to lume. They tend to not be as bright as the big lume plots that you have on dive watches. So I expected the Lume on this to be disappointing. I was not disappointed. In fact, I was blown away at what they accomplished. Now, this is not up to the same level as some, dive watches or even Axios' other dive watches. Their other dive watches really do blow this out of the water. But yeah, let's look at the comparison. You'll kind of see what's going on here. So I've kind of chosen carefully which watches I'm going to compare this to. I have the Seiko Samurai, which I compare everything to, and then we have the Pathfinder. Then next we have Axios' flagship. So this is their previous model. It uses C3X1, pretty crazy Lume, very strong. Next we have my Orient Star Sports Outdoor. So this one is another field watch with Arabic numerals. So this will give you kind of a comparison of how Arabic numerals typically fare on field watch. And then finally we have the Aquatico Poseidon, and this one is in here because this one also has that kind of brown vintage tone Lume, so you get to see how that normally performs. Now, if we run these out for an hour, what you're going to see is that the Axios Pathfinder performs basically equivalent to the Seiko Samurai, which is really good for a field watch. It's really crazy for a field watch that has thin Arabic numerals. And it's kind of insane for a field watch with thin Arabic numerals that has this sort of brown Lume. So you see that the Arabics on this are outperforming the Arabics on the Orient Star, and the brown Lume paint is way outperforming the brown Lume on the Aquatico Poseidon. So for what they're getting, this is really crazy. This is also X1 grade Lume, so it should last longer than typical Lume anyways. So this is really only testing just the brightness after 1 hour, but theoretically you're going to keep that brightness up for a longer duration as well. So while this doesn't quite keep up with Axios dive watches, which have really insane Lume, I'm still thoroughly impressed with what they've done here. All right, guys, that's going to wrap it up. Thank you so much for watching. Drop me a comment down below. If you're not subscribed to the channel, please subscribe. I like to cover watches that are in kind of the affordable range, and I've got a lot of stuff in the queue. So look forward to keeping you guys up to date on all that stuff. As I like to say, if you are interested in watches but don't have a lot of money, this is the channel for you. All right, we'll talk to you later. Bye.